Hello, everyone, and welcome to Bookercast, the podcast where books come to life.
And I'm so excited to dive into another amazing story with all of you.
Whether you're a bookworm or just love a good story, this is the place for you.
Every episode, we explore incredible books, talk about their stories and characters, and share insights that'll make you fall in love with reading all over again.
All right, let's not keep you waiting any longer. Get comfortable, and let's jump right into it.
Sounds good.
All right, let's dive in. Today, we're taking on War and Peace.
Oh, Tolstoy.
Yeah, a massive story of love, war, and Russian life back at the time of Napoleon. So we've got excerpts from the book itself, some critical essays, even some historical accounts, just to give us, a real sense of the world Tolstoy was painting.
It's not just a long book, it's sweeping. I mean, Tolstoy is a master at weaving together these intimate stories of, like, whole families with this huge historical backdrop, the Napoleonic Wars, and he's not just giving us battles, right? He's putting us right there in the lives of everyday Russians. You really see how these massive world events, they just ripple through their lives, their loves, losses, their search for meaning.
Okay, so picture this. Russia, early 1800s, Napoleon's on the move. We're dropped right into this world, this whirlwind of change. There's so many characters, so many storylines that it can feel, honestly, a little overwhelming.
Sure.
What's the key, then, to understanding how this whole intricate plot comes together?
Well, Tolstoy uses a really interesting structure. He jumps back and forth, between peacetime and the battlefield. So you get the contrast between these, like, personal dramas of his characters and the larger historical stuff going on. It's like he wants to show you that war isn't just something happening, over there on some distant front. It comes crashing into daily life.
Yeah, it disrupts routines, makes people look at their values and priorities in a whole new way.
Exactly.
You know what this makes me think of? That scene with Natasha Rostova. She's young, full of spirit, at the opera, totally caught up in the performance.
Oh, yeah.
And then, boom, news of the French invasion hits.
Yeah.
It shatters that whole illusion of peace, of security. It's almost like Tolstoy saying, hey, even when things seem good, that shadow of war is always there.
He does that a lot, that juxtaposition. He wants us to see how war, even when it feels far off, has this power to completely reshape individual destinies. Think about it. That news throws Natasha's whole world, really the world of the novel, into a totally new direction.
So we've got this tapestry, right? History and individual lives all woven together. But with all these characters, where do we even begin to unravel them?
Right, there's a whole cast of them.
It's a lot.
Let's start with a few key players. Pierre Bezukhov, for example. He inherits this massive fortune, and he's really wrestling with finding his purpose in the midst of all this wealth and, honestly, moral decay of Russian high society. His journey, spiritually and intellectually, it kind of mirrors the whole search for meaning that the book is about.
Pierre always struck me as, like, a lost soul.
Yeah.
Just stumbling through life, trying to get his bearings.
Exactly, and that's what makes him so relatable. Then you've got Prince Andrei Bolkonsky. Brilliant guy, but disillusioned. He wants glory in the military, but of course, the brutal reality of war shatters his ideals. His transformation, the way he changes, it reflects the psychological toll that conflict takes, that disillusionment that a lot of the characters go through.
And then there's Natasha Rostova, can't forget her. Full of life, passionate, often makes impulsive decisions that,
get her into trouble.
Yeah, you could say that. Complicated situations. She's almost like the heart of the novel, feeling everything so intensely, the love, the loss.
Yeah, Natasha's journey really pulls you in. She goes from this naive young girl, romanticizing war, to a woman who understands the real weight of love, sacrifice, resilience.
Okay, so we have these fascinating individuals caught in these extraordinary circumstances. But when you step back, what are the big takeaways here? What does Tolstoy want us to wrestle with?
War and Peace isn't just a historical novel, it's a philosophical exploration. He's grappling with, like, free will versus determinism, the search for meaning in a chaotic world, the power of love and forgiveness, the role of, what one person can even do in the grand scheme of history.
Whoa, that's a lot to unpack.
It is.
So is Tolstoy saying we're just pawns in this game of fate? Or do we actually have the power to shape our own destinies?
That's the tension he's exploring. Think about Natasha. Her impulsiveness, it leads to both joy and heartbreak. So it makes you ask, are we really in control, or are we guided by forces we just don't understand? And then you have Pierre's spiritual quest that reflects this like universal yearning for purpose, for meaning, in a world that's often driven by pure chance.
It's like Tolstoy's challenging us to consider how much agency we really have in a world where war, societal pressures, even random encounters can just turn everything upside down.
And that's just scratching the surface. We haven't even gotten to Tolstoy's unique style, his insights into human nature, the complexity of his female characters. There's so much more to delve into.
Okay, so we've got this sprawling plot, complex characters, profound philosophical themes. How do we even begin to grasp Tolstoy's genius?
Well, by diving deeper, we need to look at the turning points in the novel, those moments where personal destinies clash with historical events, and really explore the profound questions that come up along the way. Like, take Prince Andrei at the Battle of Austerlitz. At first, he's all about glory, right? He sees himself as this hero. But then he's wounded, lying on the battlefield, staring up at this huge, empty sky. And he realizes how meaningless his ambitions really were.
It's such a powerful scene. It just, totally dismantles that whole romanticized view of war.
Right. You're confronted with the reality of it.
Forces you to see it for what it is.
It's a turning point for him, for sure. Andrei has to rethink everything, what's important to him, what he's looking for.
And what about Pierre's encounter with the Freemasons?
Oh, interesting.
For listeners who might not know, can you give us a little background on them?
Sure. The Freemasons, they were this fraternal organization, big on personal development, morality, brotherhood, that kind of thing. They had secret meetings, rituals, symbols, often seen as promoting, Enlightenment ideals. And Pierre, being so disillusioned with high society, looking for something more.
Yeah.
He's drawn to their philosophy.
He's searching for a deeper connection, a sense of belonging.
Exactly. And it's really fascinating how Tolstoy uses Pierre's whole journey into Freemasonry to explore faith, doubt, the search for truth. At first, Pierre's all in, embracing their ideals. But then he gets disillusioned by their, hypocrisy. Their beliefs are so rigid.
It highlights that even when we think we've found the answers, it's not over. The journey, self-discovery never really ends, does it?
Not at all. We're always evolving, questioning, changing our minds as we go.
Exactly. And it's those internal struggles that make Tolstoy's characters so real. Their flaws, contradictions, the times they doubt themselves, it makes them relatable. Even after all these years, like Natasha's decision to run away with Anatole Kuragin.
Oh, boy.
Talk about heartbreaking.
Soul disaster.
She's just swept away by passion, blind to his true nature.
Classic example of how love, especially when you're young, can be both exhilarating and totally blinding.
It really gets at that question of free will that Tolstoy keeps bringing up.
Right.
Was Natasha fated to make that mistake, or did making that choice shape her path? It's a question he leaves us with.
And it's interesting how Tolstoy sets up this contrast between Natasha, so impulsive, and Andrei, who's more calculated, reserved. There's almost like two sides of the same coin.
Yeah, representing these different ways of approaching life, love.
You got it. Their personalities, so different, their approaches to life, they really show that range of human experience. It makes you think about the choices we make, our own journeys.
One thing that always strikes me about War and Peace is how much attention Tolstoy gives to his female characters. They're not just there as love interests or background figures.
Definitely not.
They're complex people with their own desires, motivations, and they make things happen. They have agency.
Absolutely. And their stories often reflect, what it was like to be a woman back then, the restrictions, the expectations. Princess Maria, for example.
Oh, yeah.
Deeply religious, devoted to her father, longing for love. But she's trapped by her position in society. Her options are so limited.
It's tough to see how much her devotion to her father and what society expects of her, they hold her back.
They really do.
It stifles her independence.
Yeah. But even with all that, she's so strong, resilient. Her compassion, her ability to forgive, her faith, it's a different kind of heroism. You don't always see that.
Right. It's not always about what happens on the battlefield. Tolstoy is showing us that heroism takes many forms. It's those small acts of courage, compassion, and resilience that get us through life's challenges.
I like that. It's a good way to put it. And that's part of what makes War and Peace so timeless, It speaks to these universal truths. Human nature, love, and loss. How to find meaning when the world feels so chaotic and uncertain.
But Tolstoy doesn't just tell us these stories. He pulls us in with his use of language. The way he observes people. It's masterful. Can we talk a bit about his style?
Oh, for sure. One of the things that makes Tolstoy stand out is how smoothly he blends these huge historical events with the small details of daily life. He can describe this massive battle scene with incredible detail, then zoom in on a quiet conversation, a family dinner.
It's like he's showing us that individual lives are connected to these larger historical forces, like those Russian nesting dolls. You open one, and there's another world inside.
Love that analogy. And his use of internal monologue is just as brilliant. He lets us hear what his characters are thinking, their doubts, their fears, what they long for. It's so immersive. You connect with them on this really deep level.
And there are times when Tolstoy, like the author himself, steps out of the story and just gives us these philosophical reflections. It's like he wants us to think about these big questions with him, about life, death,
Yeah.
what it all means.
Totally. Those parts can really make you think. Like when he talks about the Battle of Borodino, he doesn't frame it as some strategic win or loss. He shows you the chaos, the unpredictability, how little control anyone really has.
Yeah, it's a far cry from how war is often portrayed, all romanticized.
Right.
Tolstoy strips that away. You see the brutality, the randomness, the senseless loss.
He forces us to see the real cost of conflict, how it affects individuals and society as a whole.
It's a perspective that feels so relevant today, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. With everything going on in the world, the wars, the suffering. And that's a sign of Tolstoy's genius, that his work still speaks to us across generations and cultures.
So we've covered a lot: the historical context, these complex characters, philosophical ideas, even Tolstoy's unique style. But what does it all mean for the listener? Why should they care about this book written over a century ago about Russian aristocrats and a war with Napoleon?
I mean, it's a long book, I'll be honest. I struggled with it at times. But there's just something about War and Peace that sticks with you.
Yeah, it gets under your skin.
It does, long after you've finished it.
It's Tolstoy's power as a storyteller. He's dealing with these huge universal themes: love, loss, faith, the search for meaning. But he does it in a way that feels both timeless and, like, incredibly personal.
Yeah.
Even if you've never been to a fancy Russian ball or seen the horrors of a Napoleonic battlefield firsthand, you still get those raw human emotions. They're at the heart of it. One of the things that really hit me was how War and Peace isn't just about war. It's about those quiet moments, the everyday struggles, the joys, just the act of living, even when everything around you is falling apart.
That's a great point. Tolstoy shows us that even in the middle of these huge historical events, life goes on. People still fall in love, have families, deal with their own problems. And it's often those seemingly ordinary moments where we see the deepest truths about being human.
It's like he's saying that history isn't just made up of battles and politics. It's also about all the little choices people make, their actions. And even in war, there's beauty, there's resilience in everyday life.
Exactly. And that's something that speaks to people across time, across cultures. War and Peace reminds us that no matter how big history is, no matter what forces seem to be controlling our lives, we still have choices. How we respond to challenges, how we love, how we forgive, how we find meaning when things are tough.
So if you're feeling overwhelmed by, I don't know, everything going on in the world, the news, even just your own life,
it can be a lot.
War and Peace reminds you that even in the grand scheme of things, individual lives matter. It encourages us to kind of embrace the messiness of life, find those little moments of joy, and never stop looking for truth and meaning, even when it feels impossible.
That's a beautiful way to put it. This is a book that stays with you. It makes you think long after you finish reading. It makes you question things about history, society, even your own place in the world.
And I think that's what makes it a masterpiece. It's not just a story. It's like this invitation to a conversation, a journey of self-discovery that doesn't end when you close the book.
And maybe that's the most important thing War and Peace gives us, its ability to see beyond its own time and place. It gives us insights into what it means to be human that are still relevant, still powerful all these years later.
So listener, if Tolstoy were writing War and Peace today, what would he say about how modern warfare affects people? How would he look at those same themes of love, loss, and finding meaning in our world? That's something to think about as you reflect on this epic story. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into War and Peace. Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep finding the extraordinary in the everyday.
And that's a wrap for today's episode of Bookercast. We hope you enjoyed diving into it as much as we did. Thank you so much for spending your time with us. Your support means the world, and we can't wait to hear your thoughts on this episode.
Don't forget to subscribe, hit that like button, and share this episode with your fellow book lovers. And let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We love hearing from you. See you in the next deep dive. Bye for now, and happy reading.